Alright, YouTube, I thought it was appropriate to remind people why I'm primarily focused on attacking the left in this election cycle. As the title proclaims, tip, it has nothing to do with me moving to the right, because I haven't moved to the right. It's really an issue of the same libertarianism that really confuses me as to what I should be doing in such a weird election cycle. We've got a host of candidates who continuously say, in many cases, off-the-wall things. We've got Hillary Clinton, who's not even a liberal. We've got Trump, who's not a neocon. He's moved away from the post-Reagan GOP ideology. We have a libertarian candidate who's almost kinda a libertarian. Then we have the Green Party, which is a non-issue, basically, and several other movements as well. The thing is this. When the Bush years were here, and into the first year or so of Obama's presidency, I primarily railed against Bush and the Republicans, because the kind of things that were coming from D.C., from the media and so forth, were primarily in favor of just shut up and eat whatever the government's trying to spoon feed to you. And it was mostly a bunch of nonsense. It was warmongering, religious zealotry and so forth from sort of the Bush allies within D.C. That is, the Democrats for a few years, until Iraq started to go sour, and especially after Katrina, basically rolled over and played dead for W. Then they began attacking him. The number of people outside of early social media, typically college students, who were actually vocally against what Bush was doing, was relatively small. I think sometimes people forget that. It wasn't really until the Zeitgeist era that you see the burgeoning, sort of fight to say, well, W is just warmongering here, we're not accomplishing anything. What you ended up with is, for a couple years before that, there weren't that many critics, vocal critics of W. There were people who said, well, I think we are kind of going in the wrong direction, but they were rather quiet about it. They were rather muted. And so the government had free rein to run roughshod over people's liberties. The media often tried to silence the free speech of people. We had the birth of the idea of the free speech zone, which is blatantly unconstitutional. You saw a general crackdown on liberty all around the nation. They tried to get libraries to turn over people's records on the internet and what books they were reading. On a government whim, warrantless, the Libraries Association stood against this and defeated it. But they tried to do that, and I think people forget that too. They don't know anything about that ever happening. They've forgotten, which is regrettable. And the reason why I was against all this is authoritarianism. Now, at the time, I didn't consider myself a libertarian. I began to consider myself a liberal because I was against what was happening. What I didn't realize is that once the liberals, so-called, got in charge under Obama, the same things, generally speaking, continue. It's just a different party that's continuing it, and it's slightly different in form. So, you're unpatriotic and should be shut the fuck up if you don't think we should be bombing civilians became you should shut the fuck up, sit down if you think we shouldn't be taking refugees. You should shut the fuck up if you're not a Christian became you should shut the fuck up if you're not Muslim friendly, and so forth. It continues from there. So authoritarianism is the real issue here. It's always wrong. Any attempt to censor is always wrong. Any attempt at statism is always a flawed attempt at best. These things are bad. They don't work. We can look throughout history. When governments become too powerful, they typically strangulate everything. Whether it's the economy or people's day-to-day lives, they become more meddlesome, more bureaucratic. From a pragmatic perspective alone, you don't even have to think about ethics. It just doesn't work on an economic basis. You get too much bureaucracy, eventually it collapses in on itself. I stand against these things. The reason why I'm primarily going after the left, look at what's happening in the current election. Number one, the Democrats hold the White House right now. The Democrats hold most of the media right now, which, the idea of there being a massive left-wing media conspiracy obviously wasn't true for the first half of Bush's presidency, because I can remember it wasn't just Fox that was praising him up and down when we invaded Iraq. They were all for it. CNN was for it. A year later, they started listing all the dead troops that had died that day and were being more somber. And some people began to wake up that it was a bad idea, but mostly it was a captive media. This time around, Obama is treated with kid gloves, and so is Hillary Clinton. Meanwhile, they are doing nothing but pouncing on Trump for every little thing. They've also begun attacking third parties, which is the result of them becoming viable for the first time. They never even talked about the libertarian movement until the Libertarian Party looked like it was going to crack double digits. Now all of a sudden, oh, those evil far-right libertarians, they're even worse than the neocons are, which isn't the case. You know, Gary Johnson's a little bit screwy, judging from his election tactics, but they didn't worry about these things until well after the Ron Paul era. They never took him seriously either. We had a chance to reform the Republican Party into something that could not only reliably defeat the Democrats, but do some good in the world, and the Republican Party completely ignored the idea. So along comes Trump, and at the time, I wasn't the only person predicting that because of the way the GOP had acted, something else was going to come along, and the next time around they might not be able to stop it. That was Trump. Sort of fusion, early wave conservative with populist mentality. He is transforming the Republican Party. We shall see if he's elected if the Republican Party improves. I think on several measures it's likely to. On economic measures, on certain parts of foreign policy, yeah, I think he would improve our policies if nobody completely stonewalls him. As opposed to Clinton, who is basically, vote for a third term of Obama. I'd like to point out briefly, if a person believes that things are generally going well in this country, they're probably going to vote for Hillary Clinton. The thing is, the number of people that think that the country is going in the right direction is only about a third of the population. Most and people who don't think it's going in the right direction, I would assume are going to vote at larger numbers because they think that changing things is a little bit more urgent than people who think that, just maintain the status quo, things are just peachy keen. And I would like to believe, and I think I'll probably be right, that Republican turnout's going to be higher than it was in 2008, and Democratic turnout lower. I think that ultimately Trump could be about a point behind in the polls and still win the election. I think he'll be ahead, but he could theoretically do that, which is unique to this election. It's been a long time since anything akin to that has happened. Turnout-wise, as far as partisans, or people who lean to one side or the other of the shitty spectrum of authoritarians, anyway. I think he's slightly less authoritarian than Clinton. Then again, like Johnson, every time he speaks, he gets more authoritarian. At what point does he stop being a libertarian, other than he happens to be in the Libertarian Party? And he begins to be recognized as an authoritarian. If you want to force people to bake the Nazi wedding cake, you do believe in carbon tax and all of these other things, and you were at least briefly for the TPP. I'm not so sure that that person can really be proclaimed a libertarian with any great degree of accuracy. I don't attack the libertarian movement because its core principles I completely agree with, except on immigration. That's the one issue I don't agree with them on, as far as the core principles go. I don't mind if gay people get married, whatever. I don't care if women get abortions. I do want taxes lowered. I'm not into foreign adventurism. One of the big things, one of the reasons why I started believing that I was a liberal, back before I knew the libertarian movement existed at all, was because of the absolute stupidity with which the war in Iraq was being managed by the Bushes and the Clintons, which were in league with one another. They were all in favor of it. Clinton was heavily in favor. It wasn't just she voted for it. I've already explained this. She didn't just vote for the war. She glowingly praised it. It's totally different. It's not even remotely the same. Her ideology is that of a complete war hawk, which is why I can't possibly respect her. I think she's nuts. But right now, the left, socially, is the dominant force, and the more authoritarian side of that force. The underdog typically isn't as authoritarian. They talk about reforming, scaling back, because people see the abuse coming from the government. They identify it with whoever is more prevalent at the time. Now, Obama, at first, when he was campaigning, seemed like he wanted to rescind some of that abuse. Oh yeah, well, I want to be more transparent. I don't think we should go after whistleblowers like we are. Spying on our people, not the best way forward. And these wars have to end. We shouldn't have Gitmo and stuff. And so he seemed at the time Anyone who took him at face value had to admire at least that part of him, if not his economic plan, if not his guns and Bible spiel. But certainly the reforms he had in mind sounded pretty good. The problem is, and this is why I no longer support him or consider myself a liberal or a Democrat, he never did any of these things. He did the opposite. He became more and more like Bush over time. But we have a Republican nominee who isn't just saying, well, I'm going to stop all this. He openly denounces and has pissed off the Bushes and the Clintons of the collective neocon, neolib, one-party system so badly that a lot of these people have, on the Republican side, have endorsed the Democrat, which I think is a positive for Trump. I don't think it hurts him at all. I think it helps him. You have Democrats at the same time who are proclaiming him to be Hitler. Now, Bush had to start a war that killed 500,000 people, bungle the FEMA response, and look more and more like he was going to start an atomic conflict every day before people started likening him to Hitler. Trump has never once even held an office, and he's already got that moniker, largely because of elements of the media, which obviously dislike him, as well as some of the pandering and weird things that the Democrats have said. Now, do I fully support everything Trump is for? No, absolutely not. On his immigration plan, most of it's alright. I don't have a problem with it. I think E-Verify would be a mistake. I think it's an intrusion into privacy. I do. I wouldn't deport people who hadn't committed any crime other than coming here illegally. Sorry, I'm just not in favor of it. And I don't care if there are taco trucks on every corner. By the way, the promise from the Clinton administration to deliver that, I eagerly await seeing those taco trucks, but I don't think she would actually accomplish doing so. Therefore, not going to cause me to vote for Clinton. Also, it wouldn't just be taco trucks, it would also be like drive-by mosques, like they have a mosque in the minivan or something. I'm not so sure I can get aboard with that. And like re-education camps for people who are too politically incorrect, like myself. It's not going to happen. I still expect her to lose. Not just because Trump is pulling ahead in the polling. Even when he was supposedly 10 points behind, I said he still had an advantage. And a lot of people, including some Republicans here, said I was crazy. Oh, how can you think that? Or they regressed into Karl Rove mode and started ranting about polling bias, which I thought was funny. You were wrong. You're still wrong, by the way. And started criticizing me, saying, well, this is a goofy thing that you're saying. How can he possibly have an advantage when he's behind? I recognized then that Hillary Clinton is probably the low-ceiling candidate. That is, a lot of the population thinks she's untrustworthy and inept. They can never support her. She's got a core of supporters that will vote for whoever the Democrat is. They don't have any specific loyalty to Hillary Clinton. They would be polling for Biden if he had been the nominee, Sanders if he had been the nominee, Elizabeth Warren, anybody, John Kerry, anybody under the sun. It could have been Jim Webb. Trump could have run as a Democrat, and he could say the same things he's saying now. They would still vote for him because they're partisans. They have the football team mentality. This is an increasingly shrinking proportion of the electorate. Partisans now don't even, I think, make up like half of those who affiliate kind of with either party. There's a lot more soft affiliation and a lot more many independent voters. But at the same time, they will vote for Clinton. They will turn out at the normal numbers. Turnout will be neither significantly higher nor lower than it has been among those groups. I think the key here is probably that turnout overall for the Democrats will be lower. Hillary Clinton is actually performing worse than Obama with several key Democratic voting groups. She's now, I believe, performing worse than he did with Hispanics, which is funny because, again, look at what they've said about her opponent. And with women, it's actually astonishing. The first nominee of a major political party to be female is actually losing out with women compared to her predecessor, and may end up not even winning the female vote by any substantial margin in November at all. If that happens, of course, she loses the election because she can't make the argument going forward. Because she's such a fucking authoritarian. You look at what she was talking about, child rape, and making jokes about that back in the 80s. She can't really talk about her time as a lawyer, State Department. She can't talk about anything in her record. She forgot all about it, apparently. She's falling apart. It's very funny to watch because people who thought that Clinton was a strong candidate now have to watch her crumble before the debates even begin. She is losing it. Her campaign is not doing very well right now. Now, it's had problems anyway, but in the wake of her Reno speech making her look unhinged, as it did, she's doing far, far worse. Now, I don't expect her to be the next president of the United States. Things could transpire. If Johnson gets into the debates, you could see a strange situation wherein Johnson steals so much of Hillary's thunder that he becomes the second candidate and it becomes Trump versus Johnson. I don't think that'll happen. I don't think they'll let him into the debates. But if he was, I think that if he continues using the reasoning he's been using and explicitly shilling to the left, he could put so much damage on Hillary Clinton she would become the third-tier candidate, because she's so vastly untrustworthy. A lot of liberals would vote for Johnson if they knew he existed and what he stood for, as opposed to Hillary. Meanwhile, all those never-Trumpers would siphon back into the Trump fold, which he would still win, obviously. But it'd be funny to see the Democrats come in third. This is like my pipe dream. One of those things that's probably not going to happen, but if it did, it would be absolutely hilarious. Oh, first female presidential candidate from a major party comes in third. It'd be just. It would be just desserts for a person as corrupt as she is. But I'm going to keep attacking primarily the left. If something that the right says, like some idiot like Ann Coulter or Sarah Palin pipes up, they're going to say something stupid. And I'm going to call it stupid, and I'm going to attack them. I have, and I will continue to do so. They're fucking statist authoritarians too. But as for Trump, I don't have that big a problem with most of what he's said. The idea that he's some systemic Hitler-esque bigot has never been right. It was always a boogeyman concocted by the Hillary campaign and foisted on people as propaganda by segments of the media that happen to like Hillary Clinton. And that's much of the mainstream media. Thankfully, for the first time in this election cycle, the mainstream media is now weaker than the alternative media. For the first time, it wasn't this way in 2012, almost, not quite. In 2008, the alternative media was an afterthought. For the first time, and it only took 2 election cycles really for this to happen, maybe 3. 2004, it kind of came into play. In 3 election cycles, the mainstream media has lost so much support and so much viewership that there are now independent content creators on the internet, small-time sites and blogs that have as much traffic as CNN or Fox News. There are many, many people, individuals, that are far more popular than entire TV networks are online, and TV networks on TV physically are beginning to die out anyway. So thankfully Clinton, unless she intends to bribe many hundreds of thousands of people, is going to have a difficult time. She's obviously gone after some of the major sites, not just the mainstream media, but there are certain news sites that are primarily online that she's clearly shilling on or paying off. She's obviously got a presence on Reddit. She's obviously got a presence on Tumblr. She's obviously attempting to shill YouTube and Facebook on a regular basis. It isn't working so well. So yeah, I'm going to keep attacking the bitch because she deserves it. She's a complete authoritarian. She's a loser. She can't talk about her past because her past sucks. She was a miserable Secretary of State. She was a do-nothing, mean, old First Lady who nobody in the White House liked. Bubba Bill was a firebrand too, but he wasn't quite as abusive apparently as she was. She did basically nothing other than vote for the war in Iraq in the Senate. Her legal career was a joke. She was cracking jokes about getting child rapists freed, got kicked off the Watergate investigation. Her life is just riding Bubba Bill's coattails. The more talented Clinton is what he is. Okay, maybe it makes me a little bit sexist to say that, but she has no personal accomplishments. Being senator while female is not an accomplishment. Being First Lady is not an accomplishment. Being Secretary of State and largely failing is not an accomplishment. She accomplished nothing other than to embezzle a lot of money, largely in partnership with, with Bubba Bill and with Chelsea Clinton. That's what the Clintons do. They're in it for the fucking money. I have no respect for them at all, and they don't deserve my respect. That's about all. Peace out.